Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar tonight. We are thrilled to have all of you here. We are thrilled to have this esteemed group of experts to help us understand some of the issues surrounding COVID and health equity and our vaccines. And I wanted to start by letting everyone know that this event is will be available in closed caption and in Spanish. And right now, I'm going to ask Rebecca Lillian, our technical support coordinator, to just flash a slide that will show everyone how to select their language and their preferences. Rebecca, if you could share your screen for us. So these are the instructions. If you need technical assistance, you can just type your message in the Q&A box. Or if you're watching us on Facebook Live, you can also message the team, the support team in Facebook Live. Thank you, Rebecca. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dean Brown to get us started. Dean Brown.
Thank you so much, Tisha. I'm Nancy Brown. I'm the Dean of the Yale School of Medicine, and we are very pleased that you are here with us tonight. There are many members of our School of Medicine community, including Yale Medicine, YCCI, and our Yale CTSA, Eric, our partner Yale New Haven Health System, and we're particularly pleased that the cultural ambassadors are hosting this town hall and joining along with the other members of our panel, including a special guest from the FDA. The impact of COVID-19 over the last year has been devastating. In the US alone, we've had approximately 28 million cases and more than 500,000 Americans have succumbed to the disease. The impact has not been equal. Black and brown Americans have been disproportionately impacted, with Black or African Americans and Hispanics 3 times more likely to be hospitalized and twice as likely to die from the disease. Today, vaccines provide us with hope that we can overcome COVID, but we also understand that there are concerns about vaccines. And so we have invited a distinguished panel of guests tonight to provide information and to address some of the uncertainties and fears of our communities. Tonight, I'll begin with some brief introductions of those from whom you will hear, but we will leave lots of time for discussion and questions. To ask a question, please use the Q&A function from your Zoom. We also have questions that were submitted ahead of time that we will begin with. So let me begin by introducing our panel. I'm delighted to introduce Rear Admiral Rna Vaccines, who is the Associate Commissioner for Minority Health and Director of the Office of Minority Health and Health Equity in the Office of the Commissioner at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. And Admiral Araujo will tell us a little bit more about that role in a moment. Also with us tonight is Dr. Marcela Nunez-Smith, who is the Associate Dean of Health Equity Research at Yale School of Medicine and Deputy Director of the Yale Center for Clinical Investigation, or as we call it, YCCI. She is the founding director of Equity Research and Innovation Center, or ERIC, the director of the Center for Research Engagement, director of the Posen Commonwealth Fund Fellowship in Health Equity Leadership, and co-director of the Doris Duke Clinical Research Fellowship. Dr. Nunez-Smith currently serves as senior advisor to the White House COVID-19 response team and chair of the COVID-19 Health Equity Task Force at the Department of Health and Human Services. We have Dr. Tom Balsazak, Chief Medical Officer and Senior Vice President of the Yale New Haven Health System. Tom is also Associate Clinical Professor of Medicine and Lecturer in Public Health, as well as Fellow of the American College of Healthcare Executives and the American Board of Internal Medicine. We have Dr. Alan Shaw, Chief Medical Information Officer of the Yale School of Medicine and Yale New Haven Health, and co-director of informatics for YCCI. In his role, Dr. Shao leads a team of physician informaticians who are responsible for medical leadership of a health electronic record system and support technology systems to provide clinical decision support and innovation needed to deliver the best possible healthcare. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Oniyama Abuagu, who is Associate Professor of Medicine and Program Director, Infectious Diseases in the School of Medicine. For the last 5 years, he has been the director of the Yale AIDS program in the HIV clinical trials program, and a principal investigator on numerous pharmacokinetic phase 2 and 3 safety and efficacy trials of novel antiviral compounds for HIV. But during the COVID pandemic, he has been the principal investigator on many investigational therapeutic and preventive clinical trials for COVID-19, including the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine trial. Tisha Harris, whom you've already met, is Deputy Director and Chief Operating Officer for the Yale Center for Clinical Investigation and the Director for Clinical Research for Yale School of Medicine. She sits on the external scientific advisory boards for CTSAs at New York, Washington, and Rockefeller universities, the University of Buffalo, Colorado, Florida, Rochester, and Washington, and at University College London Hospitals for Biomedical Research Center. Reverend Elvin Clayton is the pastor of Walters Memorial AME Zion Church in Bridgeport, Connecticut. A native of Waterbury, Connecticut, he attended the local schools and graduated from the W.F. Rayner Regional Technical Vocational School. What I did not know until tonight is that Reverend Clayton worked in the automotive refinishing business for 25 years before beginning his pastoral vocation in 1983 after years of a passionate pursuit of music. Reverend Clayton became a cultural ambassador more than 11 years ago so that he could help raise awareness of the importance of clinical trials for his community. He says the program has taught him the importance of diversity among clinical trial participants to include people from different ethnic backgrounds as well as women and children. Reverend Dr. Leroy O. Perry Jr. is the pastor of St. Stephen's AME Zion Church in Branford, Connecticut. Reverend Perry earned his BA from Livingstone College, his MDiv from Yale Divinity, STM, and doctoral degree from New York Theological Seminary in New York. He remarks that although he was aware of healthcare disparities before becoming a cultural ambassador, he was not aware of the clinical research being conducted at Yale. And like Reverend Clayton, Dr. Perry has been a cultural ambassador for more than 11 years. He serves as an advocate within the African American community in particular, and the larger minority communities in general. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for joining us tonight, and now begin with a few questions. Oniyama, this one is for you. We know that there are many concerns surrounding the COVID-19 vaccine, and especially for communities of color. Could you please give us some background on the essence of how the currently approved vaccines work?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dean Brown, and nice to see everyone. And thanks to all of you for joining on various platforms. So, can we just step back and think about just how amazing it is that in a short period of time that we have, really highly effective and safe vaccines. I think if you, polled all of us, a year ago as to our optimism about it happening, I think many of us may have been not too sure that this would be. So I think this is really a best outcome, and I think it's worth celebrating just the efforts and collaborations that have really led to these really landmark, life-saving, achievements regards that. Just to clarify again, the vaccines have received emergency use authorization. They still haven't received full approval, but that's a mechanism that's allowed in a pandemic setting to be able to allow people access to vaccine candidates that have been effective and safe. So I would focus on the current vaccines that are currently authorized for use in the United States. There's a vast array of different vaccine approaches that have been used, converging frankly, on the vaccine antigen or the target. I think we've all benefited from the knowledge of the life cycle of the virus. So very early on, it was pretty clear what everyone should target in the virus to be able to prevent an infection from taking hold. And that was the spike protein. And so, all the vaccine, more majority of the vaccine approaches have really focused on helping the human body produce immunity against the spike protein to really prevent that first step that the virus takes to be able to cause an infection. The two platforms that we have currently authorized in the US are the messenger RNA vaccines, as well as the viral vector vaccine. So the messenger RNA vaccines are the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, which were the lead in, more advanced stage vaccines that received authorization. And we know just last weekend that we're very proud that the FDA green-lighted the Johnson & Johnson vaccine for use. Each of them has their own unique advantages, and in some cases, just unique considerations around, safety, efficacy, storage requirements, etc. How they work, the messenger RNA vaccines, mRNA is a genetic code for the spike protein. So once it gets into the body reads it off, produces the spike protein, is presented to the immune system. And that's how individuals develop immunity to that. Messenger RNA vaccines are new to approval or authorization for human use, but the technology has really been percolating for over 2 decades, including studies in animals and looking at that technology. So that's just to debunk some of the concerns as to it being really brand new technology. It's really been percolating for a while, but truly applied to human disease in advanced stages more recently. The viral vector vaccines typically use a platform of viruses that are tweaked to prevent them from causing human disease. So they're tweaked so that they don't replicate. They typically, the parts of the virus that can cause disease are also tweaked as well, so that they tend not they're not expected to cause disease, but they're just really used as vectors or vehicles or carry genetic material. So the viral vectors are tweaked to introduce the genetic material that encodes for the spike protein as well. And so once the vaccine is prepared and administered to individuals, again, that genetic material is read off and the spike protein is eventually produced through a series of steps. And that also triggers the immune system. So the science behind the vaccines have been sound, and it's been great to really see 2 relatively novel technologies, messenger RNA and viral vectors, really come to the fore of being the first wave of vaccines that have been approved. Now, here's some of the really awesome news. So these vaccines are really effective. We found that the messenger RNA vaccines were 95% effective in preventing, again, I think in the introduction, I talked about what our guesses could have been. I think we'd all have been satisfied with anything that was above 50%, frankly. And 95% is just, as good as it gets with preventing a symptomatic COVID-19 disease. We saw that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine differs a little bit from the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines because it's a single shot vaccine. A 2-dose vaccine is being evaluated, but the data we have is for the single shot vaccine, and also showed about a 66% efficacy. Now, I want to make something clear, like in spite of the differing numbers, I think the great thing about the current authorized vaccines are that they are really highly effective in preventing severe and critical illness from COVID-19 as well as death, uniformly across the board, regardless of the type of vaccine. That's amazing. So that you could almost say that the clinical trial data strongly suggests that if you get vaccinated with any of these vaccine platforms, that the chance of you having severe disease, being hospitalized, going to the ICU, being ventilated, and dying are really negligible. And that's really worth celebrating. Now, let's put some icing on the cake. The safety profiles of these vaccines have been just beyond amazing. And we are seeing that now that the vaccines are being rolled out to larger populations, that those findings are holding up. I mean, in the clinical trials, we did not find any serious adverse events. So we're talking about things that the vaccine causes that will lead to an unexpected hospitalization or unintended death, which is just, again, beyond amazing. And I think as the rollout has occurred, we've all been witnesses. Many of us on the panel have taken the vaccines ourselves, and we know that they've really been safe. The last point I just want to make is, of course, now that we have highly effective vaccines, the question is, how can we make the best of it? And so, translating vaccine efficacy to real world effectiveness. So there are people on the panel who are way more better than me with being able to explain some of the issues around hesitancy and uptake. But one point I just wanted to make is that one of the goals of the rollout of the vaccines is for us to achieve herd immunity. And that is if we have sufficient numbers of people in the community who are vaccinated, develop immunity either through vaccination, and of course, a minority through immunity generated from having the disease itself. So a composite of that if we have enough percent of people, estimates are anything from 65 to 85% roughly. There are lots of things that move the bar along that number. But if we have enough people vaccinated, that we're able to really impact the ability of the disease to continue to circulate within our communities. So this is by way of introduction, and I'm sure we'll have time to address questions.
Thank you very much. Dr. Nunez-Smith, we opened by with the realization that people in communities of color are more than twice as likely to die of COVID than white people. But minority Americans are receiving vaccines at lower rates than their white counterparts. Are there impediments to equitable vaccine distribution, and what are they?
Thank you, Dean Brown. And let me just add my my gratitude to be here in this conversation with everyone tonight, and to thank everybody for joining. These are hard statistics, and it still causes me great pause every time I hear the frame. And I worry sometimes that we become numb to the statistics, and we forget that we have lost our family members, and we've lost our uncles and our friends, our neighbors, our co-workers. Families are grieving, communities are suffering. We've lost all this potential. And so lest we forget that, I want to be sure to honor, the over 500,000 lives that we've now lost to COVID-19 in this country. And when we talk about the pandemic, to your absolute point, the impact has been uneven, and we see communities of color among the hardest hit. When we think about cases, as well as hospitalizations, as well as death, and well as economic suffering. So, the promise of the vaccine, that, let me take us to a hopeful place, right? I am very optimistic about the scientific discovery we just heard about. It is tremendous to have 3, count them, right? 1, 2, 3, and it is fantastic. And so we all need to be able to take advantage of the vaccine development in order to get to the other side of this pandemic. So it is the absolute right question to say, where are we now with that, and how might we do better moving forward? So, the data we have, let me start there and make that point, as far as who is getting vaccinated, are incomplete. And so, for about 50% of vaccinations in this country, we have race ethnicity data. So inadequate, but I would say that despite the data challenges, the early patterns have clearly emerged, and we see that Black and Brown individuals are getting vaccinated at rates lower than the share we would expect given their representation in the general population. And so that is concerning. Some of these data, again, are early on, and we can have conversations about eligibility and priority, but I think we have to fundamentally, in a conversation about vaccine confidence, also talk about vaccine access. That has to be easy, right? Vaccination has to be convenient. So we know, for example, vaccinations are free. So that's an important first step. But I'm sure if we opened up the mics now, we could hear people's stories around things like registration, and where are some of those challenges, other structural barriers that might exist, things like transportation, not having access to paid time off potentially, right? And so, those, I think, are some of the considerations. From the federal administration standpoint, it has been top of mind to be sure that we are ahead on access. And so launching several programs in the first 3 weeks, really based on making sure that when people, are at yes, and now that's way part of our conversation, is sort of all that is involved in folks being able to make that decision for themselves. But when people are at yes, and they are eligible, they have to connect with vaccine. And so just a couple examples of some of the programs that we've launched. People may have seen the community vaccination centers, right? Some of those are mass vaccination sites. But really and truly, they come in different flavors and sizes. And so you'll see some of those vaccination centers in school gyms, right in neighborhoods and communities. Many of those vaccination centers also have mobile capacity, right? Right now we see, I'll use the phrase my colleague Andy Slavitt uses, right now we see people chasing vaccines. That's what's happening. Everybody's sitting with 8 computers and refreshing, and people are chasing vaccines. But pretty soon, vaccines are going to have to find people, right? And so things like mobile units that can get us deep into communities are going to be critical. We've expanded and launched a retail pharmacy program, including local pharmacies, independent pharmacies as well. We are aware that there are pharmacy deserts in this country, right? 90% of Americans live within 5 miles of a pharmacy. If you don't have a car, though, 5 miles is not easy. So we are accounting for that as well. We're partnering with federally qualified community health centers. All of these initiatives are about getting direct federal doses to these sites, all right? And making sure that we are putting the sites where they're most needed, using metrics like the Social Vulnerability Index from the CDC to say, how do we make sure that when people are ready, the vaccine is nearby, it is close, it is accessible. So I think it's the right question to think and make sure and lead with access and addressing many of these structural barriers and concerns. And I'm sure we're going to unpack and talk more about tonight.
Great, thank you. Admiral Rojo, you are the director of the FDA Office of Minority Health and Health Equity. Can you give us a little bit of background on that office and its mission?
Sure. First, I want to say, of course, thank you, Dean Brown, and thank you to the Yale Cultural Ambassadors for the opportunity to participate. And good evening, everyone. It's truly a pleasure to be a part of the conversation this evening. And I'm going to take a step a little bit back because many of you are probably very familiar with FDA, but just to give you a little bit of background about FDA and our mission and what we do. So FDA is responsible for protecting public health by assuring the safety, efficacy, and security of the range of products that we regulate. And of course, you just heard about one of those products, vaccines, extremely important. And our agency, we have an Office of Minority Health and Health Equity. And I think it's important to know that we have an office that's dedicated to advancing the health of racial and ethnic minority populations. So our office was established at FDA in 2010. We were originally established as the Office of Minority Health. We are now, of course, named the Office of Minority Health and Health Equity. And we work to protect and promote the health of racial and ethnic minority and other underrepresented populations by focusing our efforts really in 2 key areas. And that's research and outreach and communication that works towards addressing health disparities. Of course, we work broadly across our agency. We work very closely with our centers and offices, and we also work really closely with public and private sector stakeholders. I mentioned that we focus our work in 2 areas. So for example, we have a research and collaboration program where we aim to advance minority health and health equity focused research, which is so critical. We just heard about the need for data. And that's one of our key priorities as well. We support intramural, extramural research. We participate in research opportunities across our agency. And another area that's really important for us is making sure that we offer opportunities for internships and fellowships. We want to be able to continue to provide training in the space of health disparities. And of course, we work very closely with a range of stakeholders to advance our research agenda. The other area that I mentioned, we focus on outreach and communication. So we aim to improve FDA's communications with the populations that we serve. And we do that through a range of both culturally and linguistically tailored programs, initiatives, and campaigns. Probably our most notable campaign is our Diversity in Clinical Trials initiative, which is a key priority for our office as well as FDA. We develop health education materials. We engage in social media outreach. We really want to make sure that we have a diverse means to reach our diverse consumers. We have a website, we have a health equity lecture series where we bring experts in the space of minority health and health equity to share that information, really not only with FDA staff, but also with the public. And one area that's also very important for us, and I think that this is important across all of the work that we do in the office, is collaborations and partnerships. Anyone that works in the space of health disparities, we all know that we cannot achieve this alone. And it's critically important that we work together. So collaborations and partnerships are very important for us to achieve our mission. And one of those partnerships is, of course, the opportunity for us to work with Yale. We have a memorandum of understanding with Yale University, which provides an opportunity for us to engage with the Yale Cultural Ambassador Program, which has been so important for us as we continue to work to advance diversity in clinical trials. We've also had the opportunity to engage on various different scientific collaborations, different types of outreach and educational initiatives, as well as, of course, having the opportunity for Yale interns to rotate through our office. We've had a couple that have had the opportunity to rotate through our office. So again, collaborations and partnerships are so very important to us. So I'll stop there. I can keep going on and on, but I'll pause there.
That's wonderful. And it's a wonderful cue for me to turn to Tisha Harris to say, first, if you would explain ICCI. And I'm also interested in hearing, there is mistrust based on past research experience. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that history. And so I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dean Brown, and thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you our esteemed panelists. We greatly appreciate you being here to share the knowledge with everyone. The Yale Center for Clinical Investigation is really the unit within the School of Medicine, within our health system, within our university, that's charged with facilitating the research behind the scenes, making sure that we have the systems in place, making sure that we have the locations in place, making sure that we have the electronic tools to have our clinical research not only run efficiently, but thinking about it from a patient-centric point of view, making sure that all of our patients and our community have access to the most innovative of clinical trials opportunities. And so that's really what the center is about. And it's we have the wonderful support of NIH and our CTSA grant, which provides for a lot of that infrastructure and helps to support those activities both locally, but it also helps us make national connections so that we can partner with other institutions to share best practices and to make the research environment that supports and underpins all of the clinical and translational research that happens in the US and even with international partnerships. So those have been important components of what we do. And the center was founded in 2005, so we've been around for quite some time. One of the most important missions that we have, and it's led us to the incredible partnership with the FDA Office of Minority Health and Health Equity and many other wonderful partnerships. But one of the most important things I think that we've done as a center was to connect with our community, with our cultural ambassadors. And that was about 10 years ago. And the reason that we connected with the cultural ambassadors was we were looking across our research enterprise and like much of the rest of the country and the rest of the world, troubled by the lack of minority participation in clinical research. And so what we did as a result, we tried to understand what some of those issues and those barriers were to participation. And what we found was that there was a lot of it was related to trust. And not only the trust of sort of the past abuses in research, but also a lack of understanding of clinical research, what it means, what an informed consent is, what even the fact that the clinical research opportunity existed. And so through the partnership with the ambassadors, what we've done is really tried to spread the message that it's really important to acknowledge that those past issues did happen in research. Tuskegee did happen, Henrietta Lacks did happen. But one of the really important messages is that regulatory change happened as a result of those mistrusts, that there's additional safety protocols that are put in place to make sure that individuals are protected, that we have a IRB process, an institutional review process where all of the research is reviewed, and that review is mandated to have a community representative. And so there are things that are really important for the general community to know about, again, acknowledging that these past issues did happen in research, that there are these past mistrusts, but also to make sure that there's awareness of what has happened and what the protections truly are that exist in research. And the partnership with the ambassadors became key to that, because what we found was that our community wanted to hear from voices that they trusted. And that might not have been at the time, or even now, the health profession. And so part of the role the ambassadors have played that's so critical is to gain the knowledge for themselves, to understand all of these very complex research issues, and then to help carry the message to their community and make sure that the community members understand and can ask their questions, and can ask those questions of someone that they already have a trust relationship with. And so we formed this partnership with the AME Zion churches, African Methodist Episcopal Zion churches. I'll try not to use acronyms this evening, but the AME Zion churches of Connecticut and Junta for Progressive Action. And we have just been astounded. Our partners are amazing, and they help us be better every day. And I definitely won't try to speak on their behalf, because I will do a very poor job. I will let you hear from the experts themselves.
Thank you. Reverend Perry, I wonder if I might turn to you. And I believe you've participated in some trials, including a COVID vaccine trial. Can you share a little bit about your experience?
Reverend Perry, I believe you're on mute still.
Oh,
there we go.
Yep.
Okay, I was just saying thank you. I just gave my speech, but I guess I'll have to repeat it. Our work as cultural ambassadors has led us in a lot of directions, and recently, Reverend Clayton and I did take part in the Pfizer study. And part of the reason that we took part in the study was to say to our communities that we thought this was an important step for all of us. And we wanted to show and have them see that we believed enough in it to take it, to believe that it was safe, and that it was critical, particularly for our population, which was being impacted in such a dramatic way. I could talk all day, Dean. Is that the only question you have for me?
Well, tell us a little bit about the impact that COVID has had on your community. I
think COVID has impacted all of our communities, but I think for minorities, it's hit us 3 or 4 times as hard. So with regards to unemployment, with regards to housing, with regards to stress, I mean, just being on lockdown, not being accessible to mass or to even to have a primary care physician. I mean, it's very difficult. And so what we've been trying to do, and for our seniors in particular, who may not be able to do telemedicine or to get on a Zoom call because they don't have Wi-Fi or they don't have a computer and they're still using flip phones. So what we've been trying to do as cultural ambassadors is to somehow mediate between these inequities. So at St. Stephen's, one of the things we did is we had a class that Yale helped us, sponsored a pilot program where we worked with 12 seniors to show them how they could get on and do telemedicine, how they could find their doctor, how they could get an email and access to Zoom. It was phenomenal. It was empowering to see them to do that. So that was one of the things that we were able to do. Many of our churches and many in our community are doing things like food banks, and they're trying to help with jobs. And this is one of the things we also do in one of the places that I work. You know, like there's a platform to employment. We have to work with ex-offenders who are dads who don't get to see their children, who have no jobs and no possibility of jobs because of their record. I mean, it's devastating. And if there was any time in America when America needs to come together and start at the bottom up, this is that time. And I want, I love the fact I tell all my friends and all my congregants, I got the shot. That's good news. That's gospel news. I got the shot. As Marcella said to me once, is either the vaccine or it's the virus. So that's the good news here.
Thank you. Reverend Clayton, do you want to add anything to, it's hard to follow Reverend Perry, I know, but.
Thank you, Dean Brown. Yes, it is. Dr. Perry covers the whole ballpark, but the COVID impact that I have seen and experienced, first of all, COVID has impacted every area of our lives. I don't know of anything else that has shut down the entire world. Our schools had closed, our universities had closed for a period of time. Hospitals and convalescent homes had to end visitations. I have a 7-year-old granddaughter who lived in Denver, and I asked her last November, I said, what do you want Granddaddy to get you for Christmas? She said, Granddaddy, I want you to go to your computer and buy an airline ticket for you and Grandma and come and visit us. But we couldn't do that because of the pandemic. Think about it, banks and financial institutions had to cut back. And I don't know of anything else that have shut down churches and the house of worship. And it's a difficult thing when you can't gather for worship, to worship a God in times of death. And we pastors no longer can hold the hands of parishioners and loved ones and comfort family. So this was a difficult period for so many people. COVID have impacted me and millions of others in every area of life. But I thank God that there is a bright light shining at the end of the tunnel. I thank God that the vaccines are available. I thank God that things are getting better. I thank God for days like this when we have such a great panel who can give accurate knowledge to help so many people and encourage us with news about the pandemic, and that this will pass pretty soon. We hope. We are rising. We're gonna get through it if we keep study and continue to wash our hands and social distance. Even though I've already received my shots. We got ours, Dr. Perry, back in August, and what a blessing that was. So I think I'll stop there.
Thank you. Dr. Bosak, I think as the CMO of a hospital where many physicians have held the hands of patients and when family haven't been present, you've seen a lot, but today I'm going to ask you about vaccination and ask you to speak a little bit about what the health system is doing to address COVID still today, and a little bit about the vaccine delivery efforts of the Yale New Haven Health System.
Sure, thank you, Dr. Brown. It's, as you said, Reverend Clayton, it's a little tough to follow this incredible group. I don't want to go back over the same territory, but I want to pick up where Dr. Nunez-Smith noted two things. One is the incredible devastation and death and terrible things that have happened. And, you know, I think we need to acknowledge that in our own health system, there have been over 1,000 deaths. And while we've treated more than 6,000 individuals and discharged majority of them home, 5,000 of them home, we've had 5,000 deaths. And it's important to note that every single one of those is so important. But I want to pivot quickly to what you just talked about, which is, you know, some of the amazing things that we've experienced. And I think the vaccine is only the latest. One of the things that I feel that's happened, at least in our communities, is we've come together, I think, in a way that we haven't seen in the past. And I really appreciate being part of this panel. And I really appreciate the opportunity to highlight some of the things like Tisha was talking about, which was the cultural ambassadors. I mean, we are blessed to be in the community that we are in, to have the resources that we have, including the YCCI, to have you all as cultural ambassadors to do things like help bring the Pfizer vaccine trial to New Haven and improve our ability to do trials. And I think we've come together in terms of how we've cared for patients. We've cared for these 4,000 patients because all walks of physicians, nurses, pharmacists, respiratory therapists dropped whatever they were doing and they ran to the fire to help. And we met that challenge. And then when we had to stand up testing, and one of the great benefits we have is the Yale School of Medicine and the incredible talent of the Yale physicians. One of those Yale physicians created the first non-commercial COVID test in the country that was FDA approved. Dr. Marie Landry did. And then we stood up testing sites in all of our cities and in our communities. And again, we met that challenge. All of our staff ran to that. And now we're doing the same thing with vaccination. We're blessed, as Dr. Oniyama Smith said, now with 3 great vaccines that I can't believe that, you can read the articles about how they were done. There's a great expose in the Washington Post about the scientists that developed them and how they did it. And it's just brilliant science. And now we have the ability to deliver them. And so far, since December 15th, we've vaccinated more than 115,000 individual shots. And in that, we've vaccinated about 70,000 people with both doses. We still have about another 30,000 to get the second dose, and hopefully many, many more, 100,000. With regard to what Dr. Oniyama Smith addressed around the 2 things that I think we've all identified as challenges to getting our Black and brown citizens and colleagues vaccinated, really the 2 things that she highlighted, we've been trying really hard, not just at our health system, but really with our friends and partners across the state to address. One is the access issue. We've placed our vaccine sites in our communities. So in New Haven at Floyd Little, in Bridgeport at the University of Bridgeport at the Wheeler Center, in New London at Mitchell College. And she also mentioned how we might be able to do mobile sites. Well, we're doing pop-up sites. Yesterday, we did one at the Bethel AME Church, and it was a success. And tomorrow will be at the Christian Tabernacle Baptist Church as well. These are not mass vaccination sites. At the large sites like Floyd Little, we can deliver 1,000 vaccines a day. But still, access there is a challenge because, as folks have said, you have to navigate an appointment. And getting the first appointment is tough. Once you're there, once you're in, we help you with getting the second appointment so you don't leave the site until you have that second appointment scheduled. So how are we doing that? How are we working on access there? Well, we've partnered with the state of Connecticut. State of Connecticut has a 211 information call. If you call 211, they will help navigate you to the closest place, whether it be one of our sites, one of the local health departments, one of the other hospitals or health systems. But you can also call our 833-ASK-YNHH, and they'll help you. We've also piloted very successfully a reverse 911. So many of us have registered in our towns that if there's a disaster that they send us a text message to our phones. We use that information. We've partnered with the state of Connecticut, and we are targeting zip codes where we're seeing, particularly those zip codes that Dr. Oniyama Smith mentioned that have a very bad SVI. And we're partnering, calling those individuals, and then preferentially allowing them to get to the head of the line. But still, we're not making the progress that we'd like to see. So we're gonna have to be smarter. We're gonna have to listen to our communities about how we can get registration better. And I think information and discussions like this can help. So we stand, very ready to continue vaccinating. And by the way, it's not just us. We have community partnerships with our city and state and community health departments, and we're working very effectively with them, and our federally qualified health centers. And every week we sit, we strategize, we share resources, we share vaccine, and we're trying to get everyone vaccinated as fast as we can. So thank you for letting us be part of this. And, you know, again, one of the things that I feel is, I feel a sense of connected community that I think is enhanced through this. One bright thing that I think we've seen. The other is that we have met all of these challenges, and every time we meet one of these challenges, it's impressive to me how we rise to overcome it. And I'm sure we're going to do it some more. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Dr. Shao, some of what Tom mentioned involved, for example, reverse 911 involves using informatics in our electronic health record, both to reach patients and also, I think, to modify some of our treatment protocols in the early days of COVID as we were learning more about the virus. Can you share a little bit about the electronic health record and the role it's played both in the treatment of COVID and now in vaccination?
Sure. Thank you, Dean Brown, and thank you to the cultural ambassadors in the community for this opportunity to share this information. But I think to your point, Dean Brown, the electronic health record has been incredibly powerful for us as a tool to help fight COVID. Even from the beginning, as we started realizing that COVID was taking hold of Connecticut, we used it to track the number of positive test results that are coming across the state. And we were able to geo-map and see where the hotspots were. We were able to then start building dashboards to track our admissions to our different hospitals. And it trickled in the beginning and then became a big wave, as I think many people know, where we had hundreds of patients at all of our different hospitals. And with the dashboards and the information from the electronic health record system, we could track how many patients we had in each of the different hospitals, how many in the ICU, how many were on ventilators, who was doing well, who wasn't, and be able to deploy resources, scarce PPE, personnel to different hospitals, or even transfer the sickest patients, to others. And to your point, it was also very critical for our treatment strategy. And we had a team of experts that were working night and day to scour, for all the latest evidence that was coming across and experience from other institutions in the literature, and we're constantly refining the treatment protocols that we would recommend as our standard of care. And then we would use electronic health record to roll that out. So no matter which of our 7 hospital campuses patients were at, they were getting the latest, greatest advice and evidence-based medicine guidelines that our experts were identifying. So extremely powerful. And with the vaccination, to your point, it's also been an extremely powerful tool. As Dr. Baltazar mentioned, the different strategies with reverse 911, and folks can call our different hotlines. Folks can also make appointments using our patient portal, MyChart, as another option. And we want to make it as easy as possible. And all the different methods are all important avenues to get vaccination. And so whether you have a MyChart account or not, we've set up websites where people can log in, answer the screening questions. And then as soon as the vaccination is available, they can sign up for those vaccinations. And then we use the system to track when they need a second dose, if it's one of those vaccines that need 2 doses, and help them schedule easily so they can leave their first dose appointment, with an appointment for the second one. So the electronic health record system has been extremely integral to both vaccination and to our initial battle and continued battle with COVID.
Thank you. We have a number of questions that have been submitted. I think, Admiral Rojo, I'm going to direct this one to you. The question is that after the FDA approved the vaccines, the need to administer a series of 2 doses was determined. And now the latest vaccine requires a single dose. Can you explain a little bit about the process through which it was determined how many doses of vaccine might be needed?
Sure, I'm happy to kind of start and provide some information. And it's a process where, for example, we actually have a range of resources on our FDA website, which I think is really important to know because it actually goes through the entire vaccine approval process. which is really helpful to understand, because then you can also understand, as we've heard earlier, how, of course, the vaccines right now have been authorized under emergency use authorization. So it talks about that process, and it also talks about the process for vaccine approval. For all of the vaccines, and we've talked about the 3 vaccines that are out there, we've talked about, there's also been advisory committee meetings that have been really important. Those advisory committee meetings, there have been discussion related to that entire process, and we've been able to also get public feedback. Basically, as far as the approval, it's based off the data that is submitted. And our career scientists at FDA review that data. It's a very rigorous process. They review that data, and based off the data, also, of course, we have the public advisory committee meeting. That's how those decisions are made. And the other thing that I will highlight again that I think is really important, it's important to understand that process. And we have an entire Vaccine 101 webpage on the FDA website that I think is really important and helpful. There's even an infographic that kind of walks you through what that process looks like.
Great. We'll try to get that up on the chat if we can. Oniyama, I wonder if you could expand a little bit on this, and based on data from trials. And a related question that people have is, for those who have been vaccinated, what do we know about how long it lasts and whether there'll be a need for a booster, or those sorts of questions?
Yeah, that's a great question that we don't have all the answers to. So we know that the clinical trials have really been going on in the most part for less than a year, especially for the phase 3 trials. But there's starting to be emerging data from the earlier phase trials. For example, the Moderna group have published their data 120 days after the first vaccination, still showing robust trajectories of both antibodies and neutralizing titers. A little bit of a drop, but still sufficient to be able to protect against infection, we think. Now, the problem is that we don't have great information about what the correlates of immunity are. So, for example, what antibody levels, afford protection. So there's still a lot more to be learned about that. But the clinical trials are going on for a while, and the phase 3 trials will be going on for 3 years. And there's going to be longitudinal assessments of the antibody levels over time. And I think we're going to learn so much more. But I think based at least on the early data on the trajectories, and in the absence of any variants that seriously evade the current vaccine responses, we think that at least, for the next year or so, people who are vaccinated should be protected, but that can change.
Thank you. Reverends Perry and Clayton, both of you volunteered for vaccine trials in August, at a time when we did not know a lot about them. And when you also had the possibility that you might receive a placebo rather than the active vaccine. Tell us a little bit about why you participated. Were you afraid? Would you recommend that others participate in clinical research?
Dean Brown, there was no fear, because we knew that by the time it got to phase 3, it's relatively safe. I was hoping that I received the actual vaccine, and because I didn't have any effects from the shots, I thought I probably got placebo. Mm-hmm. But when the study became unblinded, I realized that I got the actual vaccine, and boy, it was a happy day. I did this because, early on, there were few people of color that participated in the study. I think before we completed it, I think we were up to about 41%. So I think we did a little help to help our cause, and because of it, I think our community and the world have been helped.
Reverend Perry.
Yes, I agree with my colleague. I think one of the things that a person has, what we've been trying to suggest to our community, is that we need to take charge of our health. And, you know, we just can't depend on other people. We really have to stand up, man up, woman up, and take charge of our health. I was mentoring a young fella, one of the dads in my program. And as a culture ambassador, I was telling him about the Pfizer study. And I was saying, man, you can go down to Yale and maybe get the vaccine, or if not, the placebo, but you would be in the study and you'd be helping yourself and so many other people. And he said to me, Doc, don't do it. He said, wait. And that's part of our community. Wait and see how other people react and what happens to them. And so I said to him, but if we wait, we may not be around to see the results of how this affects other people, because we won't be here. And then I realized that maybe what I needed to do was to demonstrate what I was putting, you know, like you said, put your money where your mouth is. I said, maybe I need to just, by example, lead. And I think that was one of the motivating events that led me to go ahead and sign up for the study. And then I asked my daughter, who was 28, and you know, young people, I'm always impressed with them. I just don't understand them. So I was expecting her to say no, and then she said yes. And I said, wow, that's really interesting, because the people that I were talking to basically were in her age group, were really, they did not believe that it was important. The other thing, you know, when we look at social determinants of health, what we don't sometimes look at is the mindset of people who are at the bottom, who have a sense of hopelessness. And so when it comes to death, it's almost like it's not of great importance to them. It's like live and die, ride and die kind of thing. So it's kind of, you know, you got to reach out to these people and say, but you're important. You want to be around for your children. You want to be around for your parents. You want to be around, you know, because you can be around if you take charge of your health. But if you don't, then there are consequences that not only are going to affect you, but your community. So I heard one doctor talk about herd community, and another doctor said, no, it's not herd, it's community. What we're interested in is safeguarding our community, empowering our community, vaccinating our community. And when we do that, the outreach and the platform becomes enormously large and meaningful. And that's what we have to do.
Thank you. There are a couple of questions that have come in while we've been speaking. And one question, and I'm not sure, maybe Tom, the question is, and this may be also Marcella, if we could speak to the challenges of vaccinating undocumented and refugee populations and what programs might be in place.
Sure, we have, you know, we have a program that we didn't start it out this way, but it has turned out to be a way for undocumented individuals to get health care. And it's our program called Project Access. It's on York Street. It's right underneath the Air Rights Garage. And it was set up initially, modeled after other programs around the country, to give access to individuals who may not have it because of lack of insurance, access to specialty care. And, you know, every year we navigate hundreds and hundreds of folks. Right now, it's primarily undocumented because of the Affordable Care Act. Many of the folks that didn't have insurance had access now to Medicaid and other types of insurance products. So we've been using our known list of individuals who are undocumented because they've received care through Project Access. And we try to keep those lists separate, and I can describe that later if you'd like. And we're trying to reach out to them. But we, you know, the vaccine is free. If you have no insurance, you don't need to pay anything for it. All you simply need to do is give us your name. If you will register you, and of course, your immigration status is not at all anything that we ask for, look for, have any interest in verifying. So, those populations can be very hard to reach. And again, we're trying through a couple of different levers to do that. But let me ask Marcella if she has other ideas, and maybe there's some folks here on the phone who might also give us some additional ideas.
Yeah, no, perfect. So, so glad to have you talk about Project Access, such a great asset in our community. I would say that kind of part of that question too are some of the concerns that might be unique to people who are undocumented or refugees. And so really important to speak to it. I would just pick up where you left off. One of the key principles here, of course, is making sure that people don't have any surprise cost or no out-of-pocket cost for the vaccine. One of the things that we're doing from a federal administration too is trying to communicate, and grateful for this opportunity, some of those other things that come up as well. For example, what is the flow of data, right? As people are registering and giving information, there often are concerns about kind of where will data go. And so important to say here tonight that there are firewalls, right? None of the data collected in terms of registration for vaccination goes to, for example, immigration or immigration services. We have made it very clear that all vaccination sites are immigration enforcement free zones, right? So there will be no immigration activity at any vaccination site. That is critical. Other things too, early on, the registration systems, many of them were asking people questions such as, are you a US citizen at time of registration? We have to get rid of those barriers, as well as asking people about, in addition to the immigration status, asking for kind of mandated identification. So these are some of the specific structural barriers, as we've been talking about tonight, that have to be overcome. I think so many people have said it tonight. One of the things that's incredibly valuable is listening, engaging with communities. Communities are experts in what they need most. We've been able to have great stakeholder conversations with advocates representing these very communities who made clear, like, these are what the barriers are. These are some of the concerns that are unique, back to the trusted messengers again. So it's making sure the policies are in place to promote vaccination, but also that trusted messengers know that and can share that information with those communities who, for lots of understandable reasons, might have hesitancy about getting vaccinated. And I think that's an important maybe seg for other parts of the conversation when we talk about vaccine confidence. The questions people have about vaccination are going to be really unique. And so we have to keep in mind that these messages have to be tailored. One person might be thinking about immigration enforcement and somebody else might be thinking about infertility. So how do we make sure that we're addressing all of these different concerns and that people are hearing this from the folks that they trust to hear that information from?
Thank you. Related to that, Oniyama, one of the questions in the chat relates to vaccine rates among our military and the sort of urban legend that circulates about side effects of vaccines. How do you talk with patients about those things and educate about side effects or lack of side effects?
Yeah, so part of my message is that side effects happen, and they happen with every vaccine under the sun, and so they're reasonably to be expected. The other message I have is that the side effects that happen with the vaccines are in majority of cases a good thing, because they correlate pretty well with developing appropriate immune responses to the vaccine. Two reasons why I say that. One is we find that younger individuals tend to have more of those side effects than older individuals, and we know that's because younger people tend to have much more robust antibody responses to the vaccine. Another observation which buttresses that point is that people also tend to have more side effects with the second dose. And looking at some of the early phase immunogenicity data, or the data around what happens to the antibody levels with the second dose, shoots up with the second dose, and there corresponds very well with that. So in general, I tell people receiving the vaccine to expect some occur more frequently than others, but they're really just a good sign that your body is responding well to the vaccines. And again, I remind everyone that severe adverse events that led to hospitalization and death were literally unheard of in the vaccine platforms that have received emergency use authorization. So these vaccines really have a great safety record. And the side effects, when they do occur, tend to be mild to moderate. They happen a day or two after vaccination. They resolve pretty quickly. And frankly, they're well worth it comparing to the protection that you get from the vaccine.
Thank you. Admiral Araujo, one of the characteristics of the vaccine trials is that there were many minority participants, and your office has been very engaged in increasing, as you mentioned at the outset, the participation of those who were underrepresented in trials. Can you talk a little bit more about the importance of that and its impact on our treatments that we have to offer?
Sure, absolutely. And I also want to kind of circle back really quickly just to comment on something that was just mentioned, because I think it's been really important to know the types of information and resources that are available to all of us. We've been talking, of course, about vaccines. We understand, of course, when we talked about vaccine hesitancy. And one of the things that I think is really important to know, for example, our FDA, Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, they are responsible for the oversight of vaccines at FDA. Our agency, being a regulatory agency, we have, of course, rigorous standards for safety, accuracy, and effectiveness. And one of the things that I think, as we've all talked about, we know that vaccines are one of the safest ways to help prevent infectious diseases like COVID-19. They can protect you and your loved ones, so it's so important for us to get vaccinated. It's also important for you to know where you can get resources. And I did want to highlight that for FDA, we have our COVID-19 vaccines webpage. It has information related to emergency use authorization, EUAs, all the terminology that you're hearing us talk about tonight when we talk about vaccines. And it has a lot of information there that I think is really helpful. So I did want to add to the conversation about the resources, because I think it's really important for all of us and something that we've been really focused on throughout this pandemic to make sure all of us, our diverse communities, the public overall, that we have current and accurate information so that we can all make informed decisions. So I wanted to make sure that I highlighted that resource. Diversity in clinical trials, that's a key priority for our office. It's something that we've been working on for a very long time. So I know, of course, with COVID-19, with the pandemic, it has really raised awareness about the issues that we've been working to address for many, many years, and the inequities that our communities have faced. And one of those, of course, is our work to advance racial and ethnic minority participation in clinical trials. We have long worked to do this at FDA. We have hosted public meetings. We've developed tools. We've also issued guidance documents, which is a way for us to communicate to the public our current thinking. Of course, as I mentioned, diversity in clinical trials is a priority. In support of our agency efforts, our office developed an ongoing public education and outreach campaign. And that campaign really works to try to overcome some of the barriers from diverse communities from participating in clinical trials, making sure that we have resources available that highlight, for example, what a clinical trial is, what it means to participate in the clinical trial, and why we need diverse participation. We have videos, we have public service announcements, we engage in social media outreach. We really work to amplify these messages, especially during COVID-19, because it was so important for us to have diverse representation, not only in our vaccine trials, but also in the treatment trials that were ongoing. So we really work to amplify those messages about the importance of diverse participation. And also, as part of this ongoing campaign, again, work that we've been doing for a number of years, we also have a lot of close collaborations and partnerships. As I mentioned earlier, that was also part of our engagement with the Yale Cultural Ambassadors, which has been so critical, because as part of our ongoing collaborations, from working across government, academia, industry, working with the Yale Cultural Ambassadors, we know that community engagement is so important. And that is one of the strategies that can help us be successful in enrolling a diverse population. And as Reverend Perry and Clayton have said, and what they've also, of course, worked to help us educate others on, is the fact that we need to have bi-directional engagement with the community. We need to make sure that we have consistent engagement with the community, and also that we are making sure that we have long-term strategies to engage with the community. And all of that is important in our work related to diversity in clinical trials. And one other area that I'll just highlight, I mentioned the fact that this is work that we've been doing for a number of years, of course, also during COVID-19, and amplifying and raising awareness. But we also do this for other diseases and conditions. One of those, for example, is lupus. We actually have patient listening sessions that are coming up related to that. So I did want to highlight that we know that when we talk about clinical trial diversity, we need to think about that across the diseases and conditions that impact our minority communities.
Thank you. Tisha, I wonder if you could share, the Yale Center for Clinical Investigation and CTSA have supported a lot of this work in increasing inclusion in our clinical trials. And if you could share a little bit about that and maybe even talk about why did YCCI start the Cultural Ambassadors Program?
Thank you so much. And just to echo Rear Admiral Araujo's comments, we've been thrilled to work in this space, and it really was born out of a need. We, like many other centers, when we started this effort, most of our clinical trials had very low representation of minority populations in any of our clinical trials. And I think it was really when we started the Ambassadors Program, we heard from the community that the only way we were going to change this was to have the voice of the community at the table. And so it's been wonderful to partner with Admiral Araujo and the FDA over the past few years, but also with Marcella and with Alan, with our wonderful principal investigators like Oniyama and the ambassadors, but really in this platform approach, thinking about not only supporting the ambassadors and making sure that they have the information and that they can, we can support what they're trying to do in the community, but having them at the table at the time when we're designing the study, having them at the table as we think about recruitment strategies. And so making sure that our trials are designed in a way that actually facilitate diverse participation, making sure, as Marcella already mentioned, that we're thinking about issues like transportation, or as Alan mentioned, that we're thinking about how to reach them, whether that be through the electronic medical record, and making sure those invitations are culturally and linguistically appropriate, or reaching them at a pop-up clinic at the church. And our work did begin prior to COVID. We are all here talking about COVID and the spotlight that COVID has shown on these issues of health inequity and disparity, but it is really important. There are lots of clinical trials. We have, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, other areas, HIV, which is the area that Oniyama works in when he's not doing this. But I think that it's very important to focus and make sure that we have awareness about the importance of diverse participation across all clinical research, because that's how we'll get the answers. That's how we'll make sure that we know that drugs and devices are safe and effective across populations. And so I think that those are really important messages that we have been focused on here in Connecticut, and part of why we formed the Cultural Ambassadors, because we knew that having those voices, those trusted voices, was going to be the way to reach the community and make sure that they understood and had all of their questions answered as they considered clinical trials participation.
Maybe I'll turn to Reverend Perry and Reverend Clayton. Tisha talked about this importance of a bi-directional partnership, and I know you've been both very active in the community in influencing, for example, pushing for flu vaccination and talking about the areas where you'd like to see more research. I wonder if you could share your thoughts on where you'd like to see clinical research and what you think would be of highest impact.
I think that in terms of our bi-directional relationship, one of the good things is that we're able to say to our Yale investigators and YCCI, here are some of the things that impact our community, and we want to focus on these things like sickle cell, or prostate cancer, or health, breast cancer, and so then we in our partnership, they help us to bring researchers in that we can talk to, And then we can help them while they help lead us, so that when we talk to our people, we can say, you know what, there's a study going on, or there's a possibility that a trial may be helpful to you. And I think that's phenomenal. It's not one-sided, it's not one way, but it's bi-directional, and I like that. The other thing is, even in the structuring of what we do, we're able to sometimes push forward with our own ideas and agendas with regards to what we think will help get the message out. For example, I have been stressing for 3 years that we needed to be on this Black radio station, and finally we got our approval, so that now on any given Monday, we can have people from Yale, professional people, doctors, people from IRB, people who are doing research, to come onto the show and meet with our community through the Zoom session, through Facebook and radio live. We also have a newspaper, so that when people look at the newspaper, they don't see pictures of just Caucasian people in medicine. They see us working with Caucasian people in health industry, and it makes it more palatable for them when they know that we are involved in this. And this is, we're stressing across the board. We have so many plans, and I really feel that if I air them now, they may have a hopeful chance, like our Young Ambassador Plan, and what I call the reparation plan, which is to help more minorities get involved in the healthcare industry, starting with junior high and high school. I think that those are things that we're looking for sponsors and people to help us to do, but I think that could change the face of medicine and the disparity that lags somewhere between why we go and why we don't go to see our primary care physician.
Reverend Clayton, would you like to add anything?
Dean Brown, I think Dr. Perry covered that very, very well. So I ditto those comments.
Okay.
Dean Brown, may I just address one thing, Reverend Perry? So thank you, Reverend Perry. For our listeners, our cultural ambassadors have so many wonderful ideas that it takes me some time to catch up with them, but we are on the radio show. You can find all of the past shows on the cultural ambassadors website of the YCCI, and you can hear actually Marcella has done one of the shows, Oniyama has done one of the shows, and Dr. Balsazak will be joining the ambassadors on March 15th. So we are in fact trying to keep up, and we do have a program, the Young Ambassadors, and it is very much tied into some of the pipeline initiatives that are so very important to all of us. And I don't know, you and Marcella both have had many, you have many plans for how we can work on and diversify our pipeline. If either one of you would like to join me in helping Reverend Perry tonight.
Well,
I pledge to help. I pledge to help.
In your spare time. So Marcella, your research interest is health equity. And I'm wondering if you could comment on whether the COVID pandemic has changed the way you think about that.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to reflect on that. I think, some of the things we've been talking about tonight are sort of core principles and values for health equity research. And this is a field that has evolved even some in my couple decades here, where we've moved from talking about health disparities, sort of observing and cataloging differences, to talking about health equity and health justice, and using a very social justice framework to think about how we've gotten to where we are, sort of systematic denial of access to opportunity and resources for certain groups and communities in our country, and helps us to think about how we solution find, which is where we should be, not admiring the problem, but intervening. on it, and doing so in deep partnership in the ways we've been talking about, in a bi-directional way, showing up with the expertise that we bring from academia, recognizing that's not all the expertise needed to solve for inequity. So, you know, I think thinking ahead to the work, what is perhaps promising is the collective now having really insights into inequities, having conversations in spaces and places that are overdue, but I think people are showing up in earnest to think about how do we move forward. It is just key that coming out, building resilience into our recovery, that we are incredibly intentional about making sure that we are disrupting the patterns that have been so predictable for so long, which communities will be hit the hardest. And so I think that is one of the hopes and the promises for COVID-19 moving forward, is that we will no longer, for those of us who are health equity researchers, so many of us have just said, well, we're sadly not surprised. And really just to disrupt that moving forward is absolutely the key.
Great. It's been a very fast hour and a half. We have about 9 minutes left. And what I would like to do with those 9 minutes is just give each of our panelists the opportunity to make any last comment. So Dr. Balsazak, I'll start with you. Tom, are you? I was inviting panelists.
I froze.
Okay. Our Zoom world, yes.
Well, connectivity at home is not sometimes the best. I'm sorry I missed it because I was froze.
Yes, I'm inviting, we have just a few minutes left, and I wanted to give everybody a chance to make any last comments if you would like to say anything more about the system's response to COVID or the vaccination program.
833 ask YNHH. If you're going to sign up for a vaccine, we got to get that number out there. We're going to be doing a lot more pop-up vaccines across Bridgeport, New London, and of course, New Haven. You know, these conversations are so important to get. I love the term Marcella was using. Say that again. It's not hesitancy, it's vaccine.
Confidence.
Confidence. I love the way you flipped it around. And I think that, you know, combination of access and confidence will get us there. So, and these conversations get all of us smarter every time we have them.
Alan.
Thank you, Dean Brown. So I think, you know, for us, it's been a pleasure working with the culture ambassadors, and I think Tisha and myself and others just, you know, understand that technology is not going to solve everything, but we certainly wanted to help, you know, bridge any divides as much as possible, and welcome, you know, ideas and novel solutions, and we're happy to brainstorm with, you know, one of those and continue working with the culture ambassadors to do so.
Great. Oniyama.
Yeah, so just reflecting back at COVID-19, I think that it's been great to see the successes that can be achieved with collaboration. And I think just listening in on the call from, you know, those involved in regulatory, those thinking about health equity, bringing IT solutions, you know, system solutions to addressing disease and developing malleable systems that can adapt to and improvise, and, you know, it's just amazing. And I hope things don't end with COVID. I hope that, you know, some of the things that we've learned, we carry on with us. I also think that COVID-19, just following up on the question Dean Brown asked Marcella, I think that, you know, some of these inequities have existed, and COVID-19 has just blown it wide open. And I think it's been an eye-opener for people who were probably previously blind or not fully appreciative of, you know, some of those issues. And I hope that, you know, these opportunities that have been created, we can, you know, address them head on and hopefully make some headway in the future addressing these huge problems.
Thank you. Marcella.
Thank you. Just again, so grateful to have been in this conversation. I cannot resist but to bring the public health message. We are so very close. We are on the cusp of increased supply for vaccine. So I'm asking everyone just to recommit for a little bit longer to all the things that we know will work to keep ourselves safe, our family safe, our community safe. You know, I say the mask is my friend, please wear your mask, right? If you are living in a multi-generational home or people who are at risk and you are out and about, you could wear a mask at home. We do it here in my family, right? The social distancing, the hand washing, just a little bit longer. Right now is not the time to let down our guard. Please, 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 we are so close to being able to have enough vaccine supply for all of the adults in the country. So just a little bit longer. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Admiral.
Also want to say, huge thank you for the opportunity to participate in discussion tonight. And I'm going to use my last moments of my last kind of input to answer a question that actually came in, and it said, what resources does your office have for diverse communities related to the vaccine? So I did want to highlight that we just recently released 2 videos that talk about the importance of vaccination for communities. You can find that on FDA's YouTube page. Of course, I just want to echo what Dr. Nunez-Smith just mentioned. Vaccines are one of the safest tools to prevent infectious diseases like COVID-19. It's so important to protect you and your loved ones from the virus. So also, emphasizing the point of mask wearing, hand washing, and social distancing, because it's so important. And I did also want to close out with one other resource that I think is just really helpful. I mentioned our Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. They are our experts related to vaccines, and Dr. Peter Marks, the director for that center, just held a webinar with our office last week. It was an hour-long webinar where he talked about what diverse communities need to know about the COVID-19 vaccines. So we will make sure that all of those that are participating tonight have those resources. Thank you.
Thank you. And our hosts for this evening, let me start with Reverend Perry.
I would simply say that in this darkness, we've come together, and that God has somehow given us a light. And that's good news, because you can't say that he did not provide us with a solution to this situation. So science and faith have come together, and we're marching hand in hand to victory. And that's my sermon. And I'm not going to ask for an offering, but that's the sermon. We have three vaccines, and 3 is the biblical number for us. And so we just urging everyone to take this vaccine, to trust in this pandemic the best solution that all of our great minds have come up with. And I just thank this panel for helping our communities and other communities get a better understanding and a better grip on what this pandemic has done and is doing to us, and how we can address it and look at it.
Thank you. Reverend Clayton.
Thank you, Dean Brown. Faith without works is dead. So we pray now that we will go to work, and we hope that those that were on the Zoom call tonight who were on the fence in terms of taking or getting the vaccine would jump on board, because the vaccine is safe, it's effective, and it saves lives.
Thank you. And last, I'd like to turn this to Keisha Harris, who organized this evening's seminar, and ask you for your last words.
So I'm going to take the podium for like Rear Admiral Araujo and Marcela did, to make our clinical trials plea. That it's been really important to have people like us in the vaccine trials, and people like us did participate. This was a trial that included people who had type 2 diabetes, people who had high blood pressure, and so many others. And I think it's really important to just celebrate the success. Here in Connecticut, we know our own site, we were able to have 41% of our participants be from underrepresented populations, but we want to have that achievement across the board, and even higher, greater, so that we really understand those issues of health inequity. We understand those issues as it relates to the therapeutics and the medicines that we have, And as Rear Admiral Arrojo says, that we really we need to carry these important lessons that we've learned from COVID, but take them into all of the other diseases and the other fights that we have, because we need to make sure that we have treatments in all of these areas where we have a disproportionate impact on our Black and brown populations. And so it's really just so important for us to think about that. It's also very important that our Black and brown communities, that we still seek health care, and that we take care of our diabetes and our hypertension and all of those other comorbidities that we have during COVID, and it is safe. And so I just want to make sure that everyone understands that. And then just on a programming note, I know that there have been a lot of questions tonight, a lot of links. We had, I think, maybe 30 or so questions that were pre-submitted. So we will be posting this video on our YCCI website with the rest of the town halls that have been conducted by our health system and our partners. We will also be posting all of the links, many of which have been posted in the chat, but we will be providing links to those resources that have been referenced tonight. And thank you very much, Dean Brown, for moderating this session tonight and keeping all of us moving.
Thank you so much. Thanks to all of our panelists. Good night.
Good night.